Welcome to the RotoWire WNBA show, where we talk about fantasy basketball. I'm Jason Shebilske alongside Kirien Sprecher. Today, we'll discuss this weekend's action from around the WNBA, including Courtney Vandersloot's torn ACL. We'll also outline some of the top players to add heading into the fourth week of the fantasy season. And finally, we'll break down the week ahead. Those looking to subscribe to RotoWire can use the promo code YouTube15 at checkout for 15% off any RotoWire product. RotoWire has plenty of useful tools available now that the WNBA season is underway, including stats, DFS advice, and betting picks. I know that you and I, Kieran, also just did our first fantasy football drafts of the season this week, so things are ramping up there. RotoWire in general is a great resource to keep up with fantasy sports, and the promo code YouTube15 will get you the best deal. During today's show, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments and we'll get them answered. If you ask live, we'll answer them on the show, but we'll also be active in the comments afterward to provide any additional insight. This weekend's action included several blowout games, but there were some surprising results, including Golden State's 27-point win over the Aces. Kieran, what stood out to you?
Yeah, obviously Golden State's win was the most surprising thing of the weekend and maybe the entire season up to this point, really. But I also have to bring up the Chicago Sky's struggles. Last Monday, I highlighted, Saturday Chicago-Indiana matchup as a great opportunity for the Sky to kind of change the course of their season after a slow start. And that just didn't happen. They fell completely flat against the Caitlin Clark-less Fever squad. Chicago just has no scoring right now. Camila Cardoso and Rebecca Allen led the Sky with 8 points on Saturday. That's just not going to get it done. Ariel Atkins, had scored 64 points over her previous three, and it seemed like she was finally catching fire with her new squad, but she had only 4 points on Saturday. And then obviously the big news was the Vandersloot injury out of Chicago.
Yeah, so Vandersloot had to be carried off the court in the first half of the game. It was announced Sunday that she has a torn ACL that will sideline her for the remainder of the season. As far as Saturday's game goes, the fact that it happened in the first half and she had to be carried off the court, so it seemed pretty serious at the time. I feel like that just kind of shell shocked the team, and this particular game can maybe be chalked up slightly to that, but also the Sky just haven't looked great to begin the season. And one of their bright spots was Courtney Vandersloot. She was in the middle of a bounce back season. So how do you think that this impacts the Sky moving forward in 2025?
Yeah, I think that's a totally fair point about being shell-shocked on Saturday, especially, losing your veteran point guard, right? Like she runs the whole offense, so it's not surprising that when she got hurt, the offense just wasn't there. But like you said, the offense just really hasn't been there at all outside of Vandersloot's, strong start to the season. So we'll see. There's no clear option that's going to step up. I feel like we could be talking about Rachel Banham or Rebecca Allen or even Onueri as candidates that are going to step up over, the next couple of weeks, couple of months. But I think this is just a time where I'm just going to say, it's time to buy Hailey Van Lith stock, right? Like she is an offensive player. You're going to need offense. She's a rookie. She's going to need some developmental minutes. I think, she's probably the only player that only Chicago Sky player that I'm adding today that I'm like, I could see her on my roster in a month from now. The rest of the players, yeah, pick up Rachel Allen, pick up Rebecca Allen, play the waiver wire game. But I feel like Van Lith probably has the most staying power for players that are going to step up in Courtney Vandersloot's absence.
Yeah, the Sky, they definitely have pieces that should be able to help them as the season progresses so that they won't be completely blown out every game. Like Ariel Atkins and Angel Reese, both of them have just been kind of cold from the floor lately. And it's understandable. Every player goes through cold stretches, but the team, especially sans Vandersloot, will be relying on them all the more to pick back up in terms of efficiency. And the pressure is on them because if they are cold from the floor, most teams have the depth that they'll be able to have other players who are able to step up. The Sky really aren't in that situation right now, and they still have 10 healthy players, I believe. So I don't think that they're quite eligible to assign a player to a hardship contract. But I think that they need to try and figure something out, whether it's adding Ari McDonald once she's let go by the Fever, or someone else. But I think that they do desperately need some backcourt help who are able to put up some points for them.
Yeah, and like even without Vandersloot, like you said, the offense should be better than it was Saturday once they get a game plan. You know, they didn't have a game plan to lose their veteran point guard on Saturday, right? You don't want to go into a game with that game plan. So now once they have some time, you know, to establish, you know, a new system and new go-to players, there'll be more continuity on offense for sure. And you're talking about Ari McDonald, players not even on the team yet. What about Mariah Jefferson? I know she's been hurt and then she got cleared, but then didn't play. Still hasn't like appeared in a game for the Sky yet. Mariah Jefferson is another player. If she's healthy, I don't know if she's healthy right now. She's been on and off the injury report. So once healthy, maybe Mariah Jefferson is a player that steps up. But again, if she wasn't seeing playing time over the first couple of weeks of the season when they were really, really struggling, it's tough to see her be fantasy relevant over the next month or so.
Yeah, and Jefferson is so confusing because in 2022 and 23 with the Lynx and Mercury, she averaged double-digit points in each of those seasons. But last year, once she was acquired by the Sky, she was just a non-factor, averaging 0.9 points. This year, she hasn't seen the floor at all. So I think that it's possible that she sees some playing time, but I don't think that she'll be fantasy relevant given just the minimal role that she's had this year.
For sure.
And in light of Vandersloot's injury, there are certainly several players to add in the Sky backcourt who should become more relevant. You mentioned a few of them. For me, the top options are Kia Nurse and Hailey Van Lith. I certainly think that it's possible that the Sky also explore some other options to add at some point, as we discussed, but Nurse has already been somewhat productive this year. She's certainly been inconsistent and hasn't had much upside, but I think that Vandersloot's absence will at least lead to some more reliable production for Nurse. I think that Van Lith is intriguing, especially in deeper leagues where Nurse may already be rostered. The consensus heading into this year was that Van Lith would primarily play behind Vandersloot in order to learn, but the rookie Van Lith may be thrust in action a lot sooner than expected. The Skies seem unlikely to be competitive as the season rolls on, so this could be a really good opportunity for Van Lith to develop, and a lot more trial by fire than they expected. But I think that the lowered expectations for the Sky should allow for Van Lith to have some freedom to grow with this team.
Yeah, totally agree there. Chicago also has 3 games this week, so this is a great time to pick up some players that are due for a spike in production in Vandersloot's absence. I think, like I said earlier, Van Lith is probably like the most staying power is what I'll say, and leave it at that. Before we get too far into waiver wire pickups this week, I just want to say, if you didn't add Odyssey Sims last week because the Sparks only had 1 game, now is the time to add her. She's still only rostered in 52% of ESPN leagues. That's up 33% over, the last couple of days. But Odyssey Sims is on an absolute tear right now. And the Sparks have 3 games this week. So I think it's all systems go on Odyssey Sims. She scored in double figures in 5 of the last 6 games. 16 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal in 31 minutes during that stretch. Should be rostered in probably close to 80% of leagues right now. So if she's still available, do a quick check. Odyssey Sims would be the number 1 waiver wire pickup for sure if she's still available in your league. And then next up, I'm going to go with a player that's rostered in only 4% of leagues. And the only reason she's rostered in 4% of leagues is because she's been picked up in 4% of leagues over the last couple of days. Luisa Geiselsoder, I want to say. I hope I'm saying that correctly. 67. Is that correct, Jason?
I think it's probably Geiselsoder or something like that.
Geiselsoder? Okay. Mm-hmm. I was maybe going a little too Lord of the Rings accent with that one.
That's fair.
Geiselsoder, so I was like, she could be in Lord of the Rings. But anyways, Geiselsoder, 67 fantasy points over the last 3 games. That includes an 11 point, 10 rebound, 6 assist outing. So, like, obviously a clear all around player. And during that 3-game stretch, Luisa has 5 blocks and 3 steals. So impacting the stat sheet in a multitude of ways. Tierra McCowan is gone for 3 weeks with Eurobasket. Luisa started Sunday. I would assume she might stay in the starting lineup even when Paige Beckers and Tasha Harris come back. Alyssa Smith moved to the bench with Hines Allen sliding over to forward. I feel like that gives Dallas a little more size in the front court. But yeah, even if she's not starting, Luisa should have a solid role over the next couple of games, and she's available in basically every league.
Yeah, the risk with Geiselsoder is that she will be leaving for Eurobasket herself this upcoming Saturday. So she's certainly worth picking up for the next 2 games, but I think that it's probably more of a streaming situation in this case. I still love her for this week. I have her in a few different leagues already, and I think that without Tierra McCowan there, I think that Geiselsoder will be able to step up. But I think that she's someone who can probably be dropped once once this week is over, and then just kind of reevaluate after Eurobasket is over, just because the wings will probably be a little bit healthier and just more available once Eurobasket is over. But I agree, Geiselsoder has displayed a lot of upside recently and a lot of playing time, which bodes well for just fantasy production in general.
For sure.
Going back to the Sky, it also wouldn't surprise me to see Rebecca Allen in the mix for a starting role now that Vandersloot is sidelined. Allen has consistently put up double-digit fantasy points this season, despite playing exclusively off the bench. So if she enters the starting lineup, she could have an opportunity to showcase even more upside. Allen is a proven veteran in the league who averaged over 20 minutes per game in each of the last 4 seasons, so she's certainly capable of handling a larger workload if the Sky go in that direction. And she did so in previous seasons while starting a lot of games for her respective teams. And so she's proven to be capable, and she's one of those players that could provide a more veteran presence for the Sky that could be beneficial without Vandersloot. We've mentioned Ben Lith a lot, and I think that she's an intriguing player if she does take on a starting role, especially. But Allen seems like a safe bet, especially just in the immediate aftermath of the injury, to potentially handle some more minutes and just keep the ship afloat, for lack of a better word, so that the season doesn't spiral too much for Chicago.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think you nailed it with saying she's the safe bet, right? I don't think we're going to be talking about too many 40-point fantasy point games for Rebecca Allen. But consistent, 15 to 20 fantasy points can go a long way in helping you win any given week. So I think Rebecca Allen's a great ad if you're looking for that type of production. Erica Wheeler, moving over to Seattle, appears to have stolen the starting spot away from Alyssa Clark. Only 1 game, so we'll see where that goes. Wheeler also made a start when Clark was absent recently. Over the last 6 games, Wheeler has averaged 12 points, 4.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds, and 1.3 stocks in 24 minutes. Wheeler's still rostered in less than 20% of leagues, and is playing a starting level role. I think that number deserves to be bumped up a little bit. And even if Clark is healthy and starting, I still think Wheeler is the number 2 guard in Seattle. When Clark is starting, Seattle is starting 3 forwards. And so, obviously with Skylar Diggins as the only guard. So it's not even necessarily that Erica Wheeler is the primary backup guard. She's also the primary backup shooting guard, so she's good. She, if she comes off the bench, like, she still has a solid role, and I think is in the top 5 of Seattle's rotation right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Alicia Clark has been one of those players just throughout recent years. She's had a lot of playing time on several occasions, but she just hasn't really stepped up from a fantasy standpoint, and she's been pretty unreliable. Erica Wheeler had a slow start to the season over her first 3 games, but since then she's looked pretty consistent. She scored at least 20 ESPN fantasy points in 4 of her last 6 appearances, with the two times being with the 2 times that she missed out being when she scored 18 and 19 points respectively. So, especially if she's able to handle a starting role and get those consistent minutes, I think that Wheeler is certainly a must add player. The Storm are going to be competitive in a lot of matchups. They have a lot of mouths to feed, including hopefully at some point Dominique Malanga. Hopefully she can get more into the rotation. But for now, Erica Wheeler has been able to hold her own despite a lot of star power around her.
Yeah, I'll be making my public apology to Seattle Storm fans and the organization later in the show. But yeah, they're competitive and they're playing in a lot of big games, which is probably why Dominique is not getting as much PT, because when you're winning games, you play the players that are helping you win games. And Erica Wheeler, going to bring this full circle, is one of those players, and that's why she's playing such a heavy role. And like you said, just so consistent, even with her, in and out of the starting lineup.
Absolutely. And Ginger Jones chimed in the comments saying that she added Lexi Held and dropped Monique Akoa Makani, and it's working out for her. That brings us into our next waiver ad of the week. Alexa Held has been a strong contributor recently and certainly warrants being rostered in 12.1% of leagues. In more than that, Held was inconsistent over the first few weeks of the season, but she's reached another level over her last 3 appearances, in which she's averaged 18 points per game to go with 2.7 assists and 2 steals per contest. It seems as though the Mercury hoped that Megan McConnell would fill the void for the shorthanded team while Kalia Copper remains out, but Held has stepped up nicely and has showcased plenty of fantasy upside in recent outings. We mentioned Akoa Makani last week, and she's still had some decent performances, but Held seems to be the hot hand in the backcourt, and it might be the case for the Mercury until Copper is able to return that it'll just be riding the hot hand for a while and just kind of streaming these players in as much as possible. Held seems to be the player to add over Akoa Makani right now, and it's possible that also changes at some point, but at least for the next few games, I think Alexa Held is certainly worth considering.
Yeah, absolutely. And our last show was June 2nd, one day after Alexa Held went scoreless on 6 shot attempts and played 21 minutes. And then in the 3 following games, 16 points, 24 points, 14 points. But the big thing here that's sticking out to me that makes me feel like Alexa Held's production is sustainable, maybe not necessarily when they're fully healthy. Alyssa Thomas and, Natasha Mack and Kalea Copper are all healthy, right? But like it's fantasy relevant consistently. But I feel like Held has earned a role even when they get back healthy, and that's strictly because of her defense. She has 4 3-steal games and two steal games already. And really there was only that 2-game stretch where she didn't record a steal. Other than that, she's been fantastic defensively. So when you're a player like that and you have the superstars that the Mercury have on their team, obviously they're not all currently healthy at the moment. But when you're that type of player, you're going to get minutes. We're talking about Alyssa Clark. She kind of had that role in Las Vegas, being that defensive stopper or whatever. So I think the offensive production probably will slow down for Alexa Held eventually, right? But the defense and what she does around the court will still make her valuable in the next, even when, Thomas and Copper and Mack are back on the court.
For sure. And Ginger Jones brings up the point that Held's playing time will probably decrease once Copper and Thomas are back. But like you said, Kirien, I think that Held's versatile production, including her defensive abilities, will not only bolster her playing time even once Copper and Thomas are healthy, but I think that it'll give her at least some sort of fantasy floor during that time, that things might not quite bottom out, because as we talk about so often, defensive production is so important. Steals are worth 2 points, blocks are worth 2 points. So if you have a player who's able to rack up that kind of production, she's at least an intriguing option for the rest of the season, even if there does come a point where she maybe gets dropped later on.
Yeah, and we're talking about injury concerns, and Sabali has injury concerns too. So even when they get fully healthy, doesn't mean they're going to stay fully healthy the rest of the season. And you just look at the steals leaders per game in the WNBA, and obviously she doesn't quite qualify yet for the top 10, but Alexa Held, if she continues this production up, she's going to be at the top of the steals leaderboard when the season's done, and that in alone will be worthy of some streaming spots, at least in fantasy.
Absolutely.
My next fantasy pickup, it's Golden State's playing time has just been a mess to start this season, and every other week it's a different player. And I've talked at length last week about Janelle Salam and how much I like her. But I'm going with Kate Martin this week. She appears to be trending in the right direction. Double-digit points in 3 of the last 4 appearances. She played 26 minutes off the bench during like we mentioned, Golden State's huge blowout win over Vegas. Tiffany Hayes continues to deal with this nose injury, and Cecilia Zandalicini is in Eurobasket for a month too. So, Kate Martin, I feel like trending in the right direction, and it has a clear path to more minutes in the future.
Absolutely. And Martin, as a rookie last year, even while playing for the star-studded Aces, she still had a few periods in which she would just be a solid fantasy contributor. I think that with the Valkyries, it's certainly possible that she carves out more sustainable production, just because we've seen with the Valkyries, they're a team that's kind of in flux. They have their inconsistent performances as a team, but the game against the Aces on Saturday, in which the Valkyries picked up a 95-68 win, Martin was really productive in that game, scoring 12 points, 7 rebounds, and assist. And so I think that if she's able to keep up that kind of production, she can not only be good for fantasy purposes in the short term, but also good for the Valkyries in the long term, which just go hand in hand. That I think that she could have a role as the season rolls on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, I don't think Kate Martin is ever Paige Beckers or Caitlin Clark type of player. But when you get playing time for a championship level squad as a rookie, that just shows you that she came into the league ready, and she's going to earn a large role eventually, depending on, maybe not for Golden State, maybe, for a different team in a different year or whatever. But Kate Martin is a WNBA solid player, and is going to get that role eventually.
Absolutely. We have another interesting schedule this week in the WNBA that includes no games on Thursday. Kirien, what are some things that you're looking forward to this week?
Yeah, weird schedule, pretty light during the week, and then big slates on the weekend. Should be a fun fantasy week finish, right? A lot of Saturday, Sunday games, so big point totals this weekend. Minnesota at Seattle. Before we get to the weekend, Minnesota at Seattle on Wednesday should be a fun one. As expected, the Lynx are off to a fast start after losing to the Liberty in the finals last year. And the Storm are a game over 500. They've won 2 straight. They were just ranked number 3 in the Athletics power rankings. That seems crazy to me. I know they've played well. They've outperformed my expectations heading into the season. They deserve credit. I apologize. I was definitely wrong about that. But we're talking the number 3 team in the WNBA, and they're only a game over 500. I know the Aces have had their struggles too, but I'm not putting Seattle over the Aces yet at all. But if Seattle deserves to be in that conversation, they're going to have to give Minnesota everything they got on Wednesday. So that should be a fun matchup between the number 1 team and the number 3 team on the Athletics power rankings.
Yeah. And moving back quickly to our Valkyries discussion, Ginger brings up a good point that they just added Letitia Amihere, who's a really strong 3-point shooter. Amihere was also with Golden State during the preseason, but was unable to earn a roster spot. I don't think that she'll surpass Martin in terms of playing time, but she's also an intriguing option. If you're in a really deep league that has like almost no one available, Ami here could put up a few fantasy points here and there as well. But I agree with you that the Lynx and the Storm should be a really entertaining matchup. That that the Lynx, unsurprising hot start, and the Storm, they're winning games that they should, but also I think that this will be a good kind of heat check for them as to whether they can whether they can keep up with the Lynx during this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, like I want to apologize. Like I said that Seattle did not deserve to be in that tier 2. They definitely deserve to be in that tier 2, but now we're all of a sudden pushing them up to tier 1. I don't think their start has been that impressive. But if they beat the Lynx on Wednesday, I will be eating words for another show. But we'll see. We'll come to that when it happens. The only other thing that I would add about Letitia that from Ginger is that Letitia's a forward in ESPN fantasy. So like we talked about, that there's an extra forward center spot. So the more forwards, the better. So that gives Letitia a bump up in my fantasy rankings. But like you said, I don't think she's going to be surpassing Kate Martin anytime soon.
For sure. And just before we came on the air, we got news that Caitlin Clark will be out for another game Tuesday against the Dream. So we'll have to wait a little bit longer for her to return to the court. But over the weekend, the matchup between the Liberty and Fever on Saturday could really be a marquee matchup, especially if Caitlin Clark is able to return. If Clark isn't back out there, it feels like the Liberty should be able to roll past them pretty easily, given the way that New York has looked early in the season. But I think that if Clark is back, and especially if Sophie Cunningham is back, that it'll be a good chance for the Fever to just reestablish themselves early in the season. They've stumbled a little bit more than expected, given their injury woes. But I think that if they can keep up and compete with the Liberty, that would provide a big boost for them in the coming weeks. And another intriguing game for me, for different reasons, is the matchup between the Sun and the Sky. I think that this Sunday game will show just how competitive Chicago might be in Vandersloot's absence. The Sky will have had a few games under their belt ahead of this matchup. They play the Dream and the Liberty this week. And so I'm interested to see whether they can contend with the team that has the second worst record in the league. If Chicago really struggles in this game, I think that I'm pretty worried for them for the rest of the season. And if they can compete, I think that they'll have a chance to potentially hover around like playoff contention. But I think that if they struggle, that this could signal pretty bad things for Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. If they can't compete against the Sun, and obviously it's a quick turnaround after the Vandersloot injury, and it might take some time for them to, get back or develop a new system without Vandersloot. But they have to compete. If they don't beat the Sun, this might be, a completely lost season for the Sky. And then going back to the Liberty Fever matchup, absolutely number one game on the docket for this week, should be must-watch TV. I think before this news dropped, I think me and you were both kind of hoping that Clark would play tomorrow and then, maybe not full minutes, play limited minutes, and then have a couple days off before, really gearing up for this marquee matchup. Now she's not playing, so then maybe there's going to be some rust for that Saturday matchup. And then maybe if the Fever struggle, then it's a blowout. And a lot of different questions can be asked about this, but I think Clark is trending in the right direction. You see the videos on, Twitter of her on the sidelines dribbling, tennis balls. Like she feels like the kid that's being told that she can't play anymore, but she's like, I don't care. Like, get me out on this court. So my interpretation of the situation would be Clark's going to be on the court before too long, and this absence is mostly just precautionary. But when in a precautionary reason, there's no reason to rush her back. I really hope Clark plays. The last time these two teams met up, it was probably the best game of the season so far, 90-88 victory, big comeback by the Fever, but the Liberty pulled it out. So really hope Clark plays, and that should be a fun weekend game.
Yeah, and Stephanie White was pretty non-committal today during her press conference when she was asked whether Clark had been cleared for basketball activities. She basically said that like cleared is a strong word, and that they would start to ramp her up. And I think that this week, since the Fever don't have many games, that'll be really beneficial for Clark. So hopefully she can start to get back into those drills. And even if she is out for Saturday's game against the Liberty as well, it seems like her return is on the horizon at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And playing Tuesday and then playing Saturday, that is a lot of days in between. But that if she did play tomorrow, that would be rest Wednesday and then gear back up Thursday, Friday. She just has a full week to gear up, and hopefully she's ready to go. She's still young. She doesn't need too much time to shake off that rust. And I'm sure that shot never gets rusty. Let's be honest. Come on.
Exactly. That does it for this week's show. We'll be back next Monday at 1 p.m. Central. Be sure to join us then. Thanks for watching.
Have a good one, everybody.